I owned up to making the business and financial mistake that I did. I held so much shame for how could I be a financial therapist who made a huge financial mistake? How can I be helping people cultivate a healthy relationship with their money when I was following kind of this machinery? That felt terrifying to me. I felt very fraudulent. There was a lot of imposter syndrome going on. And when I shared parts of my story, I thought I was going to get the feedback of, yeah, you are a fraud. And instead I got the opposite. So that was really healing and powerful for me.
This is Rebel Therapist, a podcast for entrepreneurs who are trained as therapists and who want to level up their businesses, make a bigger impact, feel fulfilled, and be very well paid. I'm your host, Annie Schusler. This week, I'm talking to Lindsay Bryan-Podvin, a biracial financial therapist, speaker, and author. In her clinical practice, she helps people get their mind and money in balance. She's also expanded her services to help private practice therapists grow sustainable practices from the inside out. Last time Lindsay was on Rebel Therapist, it was almost exactly a year ago. You can check out Lindsay's episode on December 3rd, 2019, and it's all about creating and launching her first scaled offer. It's a popular episode. I was just a guest on Lindsay's podcast, Mind Money Balance, and we started talking about how we've both made changes to our business practices in 2020. The uprising has helped just about everybody take another look at our values around anti-oppression and liberation, and to do a deep inquiry and root out any practices that don't align with the kind of impact we want to have. It's also an opportunity to add in practices that move us and our clients and participants towards liberation. For both Lindsay and I, these were not new questions or new values. It was more like a punctuation mark in our journeys to be anti-oppressive in our businesses. You're going to hear an honest back and forth today about some of the changes we've both made in our businesses and why we've made them. Lindsay shares what she's changed in her marketing, her sales, and in delivering her offers, and how these changes have impacted her bottom line and her emotional life. Since we're touching on justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, I'm going to share some experts in the show notes who both I and Lindsay have turned to in getting help and making changes. Not an exhaustive list in any way, but we wanted to share those resources with you. All right, let's dive in with Lindsay. Welcome, Lindsay.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here.
So I was a guest on your podcast recently, and we were talking about how we've changed our businesses in 2020. And you mentioned that you've been taking steps to decolonize your business this year. And one part of that I know that we've talked about has been around a new level of transparency. What else are you thinking about when you say that you're decolonizing your business?
Oh, it's a huge question. And just to back up, I would say that when I was building my online business as a therapist, I did what so many of us do, and I turned to the online world to seek out coaches and consultants and courses so that I could put my business online and scale it. And in the process of doing so, only after I was kind of in the matrix did I realize that I had aligned myself with practices that were not in alignment with my actual values. So for me, decolonizing really looks like what feels best for me instead of rigidly adhering to someone else's guidelines. And when I say someone else or when I say a coach, I'm not talking about a specific person. It's about a pattern in a system that has been created that has really kind of trickled down from a handful of problematic people that so many of us have unknowingly been trained by. So for me right now, there are a handful of things that I'm doing differently. And namely, to your point, it's the transparency piece. It's about saying, here's where I stand, here's what my business is about, here's what I will and won't tolerate. And we can get into the actual hows as we get into this conversation a little bit further.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know, like, some people might be familiar with the phrase bro marketing,
Totally.
and, like, that that gets called to mind for me that in the online world, in online marketing and in online services, sometimes we've just seen that template of kind of bro marketing, which can, and when I say that, I'm thinking about folks who are kind of using manipulative tactics in their businesses and who are using, not that this is always wrong, but, things like, bait and switch, well, no, bait and switch would always be wrong, but things like, maybe a countdown timer, or where you feel like there's a lot of pressure, or you feel like you're being told, "If you don't purchase this thing, then you're just a huge loser." Things like that are some of the things that come to mind, and I have had the same experience where some of these things we kind of absorb through that online marketing culture. And this has just been such a year to look at everything and look at everything with fresh eyes and make decisions in a new way. So, for you, what made you want to change things? Was there a moment or a series of moments that were kind of a wake up for you? And what influenced you in that direction?
Yeah. So I had been receiving coaching and guidance and all of this stuff. And I had this kind of pit in my stomach when I started seeing the type of work that I had bought into be used by those bro marketers. And then I kind of started to peel back the layers and realize that I was kind of, I mean, what I wanna say is like, "Oh, I was fleeced," right? Somebody pulled the wool over my eyes, and I was totally blind to what had happened, but it happened slowly, and I want to say for anybody who's out there that as Annie and I talk about these different things, it's not that you are inherently bad if you are using them, it's that we have to know why you are using them and whether or not that works for you. So, yeah, there was a moment in time where I kind of looked around and I went, "Oh my gosh, I have created something that is not what I stand for." And I'll give you specific examples. So I started noticing that my business started to look like those things that you are mentioning. So I had bought into, and I'm going to save people thousands of dollars here, so get ready. I bought into this idea that the way to build a successful online business is to first create a Facebook group that is free and bring people into that group and start cultivating a community, and also start sprinkling in things like webinars and masterclasses, and not disclosing at the top of those webinars or masterclasses that you would be selling something. Then at the end of that masterclass or webinar, selling them into a course, a program, a whatever. And because you'd kind of created this sense of safety and community, these people were already more comfortable with you. And then when you offered that something for sale, they were more likely to buy it from you, which again, on the surface doesn't sound so bad. But the problem is that these things were created specifically for the sole reason of increasing your bottom line rather than authentic community building and help and generosity. So I realized, like, this is not what I want to be a part of. I don't want people to feel like they fell into my web. I really want people to feel like they intentionally chose to work with me or chose not to work with me. So now the small tweaks that I've made to my business with the transparency is, if I'm ever hosting something and there is going to be a sale, I say at the top of it, "Hey, FYI, I am going to be sharing with you some information about a new program coming up. And I don't want for you to feel like this, that you won't get value out of attending. You will. And I'm going to be selling something at the end of this." Or I straight up don't sell anything at all, and I sell access to that particular class. And I say, "Look, there's a cost to join. It's a one-time fee for you to come into this class, but there is an exchange here." So that has been something that's really important for me. The other thing that's been important for me is including pricing on my website as a form of consent. Because I think a lot of people have been trained on this model that you don't put your prices anywhere on your website. You first get somebody to kind of read this lengthy sales page, then they apply to work with you, and then only on a 30-minute phone call do they find out the cost of your program. Now, at first, when I was going through these trainings and programs on learning this method, I was like, oh, that doesn't really line up with me, right? I'm a financial therapist. I'm all about like knowing what money's coming up. And I kept getting told, no, Lindsay, it's not sleazy. You're not tricking anyone. What you're really doing is helping them see that they can afford you. And I'm like, but some people actually can't. And that's perfectly fine. So rather than withholding information from them and then only giving it to them on the call, I'm saying, here's the cost of this program. And I have a range of products and services that you can literally start working with me for as little as $0 by consuming content on my podcast, on my Instagram, on my email newsletter. And the first thing that you can buy from me is my book. And it's like 15 bucks, right? And you can start getting value right away. And then from there are one-time courses, there are, one-time coaching sessions, there's ongoing therapy, and there's ongoing coaching. And all of those things do have a cost associated with them. So those are a few of the things that I have shifted in my business because I realized I'm like, I don't want to feel like I'm tricking anyone. I hate when I attend something like that and I feel like I was tricked. And why would I set up my business to have other people feeling that way? Like I was trying so hard to agree with the way that people were doing business. I was so convinced that it was my mindset and I just wasn't abundant enough. And I realized like, no, it's just gross. I don't want to do that.
Yeah, that is such a good distinction. I've had that too, of this difference between being kind of self-sabotaging and being afraid to make money, or being afraid to ask for money, being afraid to charge what really we need to charge in order to have a profitable business. There's that side of things. And then there's being manipulative and like using tactics that we don't believe in. I know I was trained once by a well-meaning coach who I learned some good things from, but I was trained to do this process where I exactly what you said, I don't talk about the price. And in fact, she even trained me to tell people if they ask the price at the beginning of the conversation to say, I'm not sure we're ready to talk about price yet because we need to talk more about whether this would be a good fit for you. And I want to get really clear on you and what you're looking for and how I can help before I jump into that. So I'm happy to answer, but I'm gonna
Hold off. Right.
whoa,
Right.
like that's not how I talk about anything. Like I
Right.
really, I really like to answer questions in a very transparent way. So yeah, that would be an example where I think she was very convinced that this is going to be the way to give the most value. But yeah, I had to just put on my own brain
Right.
and,
Right.
and decide what to do, which is a whole process. I also like I know I had a conversation with someone recently who this is kind of a softer example of using countdown timers, which isn't necessarily wrong. I don't use it and I don't know if I ever will, but I know I've experimented with it like just a tiny bit in the past. I don't think I ever will because for me, when I'm in a countdown timer, when I'm a participant who is put into a countdown timer, it makes me anxious and it makes me feel like I may be making a decision with less than the ideal amount of information. And I would rather not be in that. But this person who does use them was telling me, no, for my folks, the thing that holds them back is indecision. And so I actually do want to push them to decide one way or the other. And I think it's not so much that I don't know about you, but I don't want to have like, these are the answers. These are the ways to do things non oppressively, as much as I really like having the conversation and having, like, if you're going to use something like a countdown timer, knowing why and feeling aligned with, no, this actually is of service to my folks and it's not a bait and switch. It's like a true value add. And now we're going to hear from our sponsor, me. Do you want to start working beyond your private practice and change the way you work? Maybe bring in more creativity into your work and your life, and perhaps move away from burnout? The first step, in my very strong opinion, is to create a pilot or beta program. I have a process to help you do that, and it's called Create Your Program. You'll create a solid program based on your strengths, and you'll develop a marketing plan that is not based on manipulation or oppressive tactics. Lots of the programs out there designed to help you launch a course or an online program use manipulative tactics in their own marketing, and then they teach you those same tactics. And this kind of stuff tends to make ethical therapists and healers and coaches uncomfortable, and rightly so. This process, Create Your Program, allows you to expand your business without doing anything gross or disgusting or that's out of alignment with the impact you want to have on the world. Learn way more about this at rebeltherapist.com/create. I would love to have you in the program. All right, let's get back to Lindsay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when it comes to the countdown timer, the other thing that came up for me is cart open, cart close. So when you're launching something, how I have come to feel comfortable is to have it truly be a cart close, because it's a cohort model, right? I quite literally do have to close this particular enrollment period because we start next week. It's not because there's like a false number of I think Kelly Deals was talking about false scarcity, like making things up, like, oh, if you don't join now, it's gone forever. But then 3 weeks later, you see it show up on your Instagram feed again. And you're like, wait, I thought that offer was gone forever. So for me, I'm really transparent. I say, look, there really is an end date to this particular cohort. If you're interested in joining and you're on the fence, like, give me a call and I'll talk through. And I'll also tell you if it's not a good fit. Like, as a therapist and coach, I also don't want to work with people who aren't going to be a good fit for me. It doesn't work for me and it doesn't work for them. We know as trained therapists that you can have, a laundry list of credentials behind your name, but if the fit isn't there, you aren't going to make progress anyway. So anyway, I do that. I say, look, this container closes soon. It's not about like, hurry up and panic. It's like, yeah, if you want to join this round, now is quite literally the time, because class starts Monday, So
Yeah, and that's just the truth.
exactly. It's just the truth. It's not, I didn't embed a code that looks like the countdown starts. I think we've all been to webinars where then you go to a webinar and then that 48-hour countdown timer starts, and they use a cookie so that every time you go to that website, that timer shows up. But then again, 4 days later, you can take that webinar again. All of a sudden that countdown timer starts right over.
Yeah. And there have even been people who I might learn something from, and I know they use that whole funnel method. And when I say funnel, I mean I know you know this, Lindsay, but like someone comes in at the top of the funnel, meaning they come in through some kind of freebie, and then they are getting a series of emails, and they're, if they sign up for a webinar, then they're in a particular series. And then there's like a countdown a countdown timer that says, just like what Lindsay said, of, you're going to get $500 off but only if you sign up in this period of time. So there have been people who I think I could learn something from, but I will avoid signing up for a webinar or for any kind of training, because I know I'm going to be put into a funnel right then and into a countdown right then, and it may not be the right time for me. So it probably is. I don't think these are numbers that get tracked. It's probably actually repelling me from certain people who I might learn something from, because I'm like, unless I'm sure this is the only time I want that offer, like, I gotta stay away.
That's so funny you say that. I did that exact thing maybe 2 days ago. There was somebody I was following and I was interested in learning more, and they had like a 5-day challenge, and I was like, "Yeah, but I can't do that right now." And because I know what's coming. But that's the
Yep.
point, Annie, is that you and I know kind of what's coming, and a lot of consumers don't, right? And that's where I feel like the trickery comes in, is that it's if you know what to expect up front, you can plan accordingly. Like, you and I know the game and we know the way it's played. So we're able to go, okay, I do want to learn more about that, but I do need to strategically time it out and wait until it's ready. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Right, and the transparency would be saying, like you said, "I really like doing this now." Really saying anytime that there's a free training or a webinar, saying, "This is the agenda. Like, we are going
Yes.
to talk about this. This is gonna be the main portion of it. I'm gonna tell you for 5 minutes about this way that you can invest in working with me, and then we're gonna take questions and answers." And then I like to do that now, like, where I put it on the sales page for the webinar, and then I also reiterate it when people show up for the webinar. I put it in the emails about the webinar so that, like, now there's no there's no hiding it. And then, for some people, that's, like, the most exciting part. They, like, can't wait to hear whether they're gonna do it or not. They can't wait to hear about it. And for some people, it's like, "Okay, well, I knew there was gonna be this 5-minute description."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I guess to be really transparent, those countdown timer things, they would have to say, once you sign up for this webinar, you're gonna have a limited amount of time to get a deal on my program. And then I guess that could be ethical. It's really about thinking it through and, like, treating people the way that we would prefer to be treated.
Right, right. And it's also, when you say thinking it through, it's also giving ourselves permission to change and to say, right now, this is the way that I'm doing business. And if in 6 months it no longer feels aligned, I'm allowed to make a change. I'm allowed to shake things up and mix things up. And I think that's the other thing that can be tricky when you are moving into an online space, or, growing, expanding outside of the therapy room, is this panic of, if I do it this one time, this one way, then I have to do it that way forever. And that's the worry that I got into over the summer, because what I'd realized was that my niche was, I had two niches, and all these online people were telling me, you're only allowed to have one thing. You're only allowed to do this thing. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I have to close my online business. I'm such a terrible person. I'm too confusing for everyone." And then I was just like, "Screw it. I have two groups of people I like to serve. I can hold space for two things. It doesn't make me incompetent in any way. I'm allowed to do two things." So that was the other thing that I had to push back against. Go, "Wait, I'm competent in these arenas, and it's okay for me to do that."
What are the 2 niches? I think I know, but
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it's great because I think it's also evolved. So when I first came on your podcast almost exactly a year ago, I had niched it down so far to heterosexual couples with breadwinning women, right? And that came from going through this process of creating my ideal client avatar, and like figuring out what car they drive and how they vote and what neighborhood they live in and what shoes they wear and all this stuff. And then I realized, actually, couples like to work with me whether they're heterosexual or not, whether they're making the same amount of money or not, whether one partner works and one doesn't. Really, I just happen to work well with couples in their 30s to 50s. And that's, and the presenting problems for them are more shame and anxiety around money. So that's kind of a niche. And it's a little bit loosey goosey if you talk to other people whose niches are really hammered down. And then as I started building that out, other therapists started landing in my inbox. "Can I pick your brain? Can you tell me how you did this? What's going on?" And I was like, "Wow, I'm not doing that," right? I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to answer those things. And then I was like, "Oh my gosh, Lindsay, you have people literally knocking on your door, literally sliding into your DMs, literally emailing you saying, 'Can you help me do this?'" And I said, "Actually, you know what? I can. And I'm going to use my approach, which is as a financial therapist, to help therapists rewrite their money stories before we get into marketing and niching and branding. So I just wrapped up my first beta launch, or my introductory launch, whatever you want to call it. And it was a 9-week program. In the first 4 weeks, we focused on money mindset, money archetypes, financial anxiety. We talked about all of that stuff so that when we got to pricing and niching and marketing, there was a why behind it. Instead of just throwing strategies at people like I had done myself and overwhelming them with this information, we really got to the root of, why is it important for you to create a private practice in this way? What type of dollars do you need to be bringing in to support a sustainable lifestyle for you, rather than just Googling the 5 therapists around you, seeing what they charge and picking a number in the middle, right?
Mhm.
So those are my 2 niches. So I really, what it comes down to is I have a clinical arm where I serve people in financial therapy, and then I have a coaching arm where I serve therapists in private practice.
Beautiful. Yeah, that makes so much sense. It's interesting too, like one of them, no, this isn't necessarily true for you. I was thinking one of them is more public, like more of your messaging that I see in public. I was gonna say is around the couples and the relationship stuff, but maybe that's not true. I'm seeing both, and the message is aligned for all of it, right? Like it's not like there's 2 different Lindsays, there's just 2 different topics and it's all around money. Yeah, that really makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, really, at the end of the day, whether I'm serving couples or whether I'm serving therapists, the message is you can have a healthy relationship with money that isn't rooted in shame. And then there are slightly different approaches for each of them, because one is more individualized and one is more through the lens of business. But really, the messaging kind of lands regardless of which of those 2 categories you fall into.
Absolutely. Do you find that it's hard to do a marketing system for both niches, or do you have one of them that's kind of like simpler, or how are you managing that part of like having these different
It's
offers?
a really good question, because when I first went into kind of going into dual niches, I I went back to all of this stuff that I'd soaked up from the messaging of like, well, you need to have one niche and one audience, and you have to have multiple. So I was, Annie, I was getting ready to build out website number 2. I was getting ready to build out Instagram number 2. I was getting ready to build out podcast number 2. And then I just went, wait, like rewind. My message really is the same. And if on Monday somebody sees something for couples, and on Tuesday, they see something for therapists. And then on Wednesday, they see something that could resonate with both, I'm okay with that. So, in terms of how that shows up in my marketing, my podcast is now themed. So, season 2 is all about therapists and money. Then moving forward, it's going to be about various other intersections in money. Season 1 was mostly about couples and money. And then future seasons will be about things like spirituality and money, race and money, things that I just quite frankly have an interest in and I think are important to discuss. And those things kind of just organically fall into the marketing on my Instagram and in my email newsletter. And even in my email newsletter, I was doing that same thing, like, I just kind of say, like, hey, FYI, you're going to hear a little bit more about therapists these next few weeks. FYI, you're going to hear a little bit more about couples these next few weeks, if there's a specific thing that I'm getting ready to launch, like a group program. But I really just kind of bucked that idea that it has to be super separate. I was like, well, I mean, the message is coming from me, so I'm just going to let it be. And we'll see. I've been doing that since July, August, and we're recording this in November. So again, I might change my mind. I might open up another account in the future, but right now it feels fine.
I love it. I love it. Something that I've been doing, I really have one niche, but there's like a sub niche within it. So what I mostly talk about is helping therapists move beyond the therapy room. No surprise. Like you've heard that from
Right,
me
right,
over and over again for the last
right.
like 2 years. And I still have a program to help therapists build their private practices, but I don't usually talk about it. I'm talking
Right,
about it right now,
right.
obviously. But the way that I sell it is that, it's going on there's a community of folks, and we have like monthly meetings. But the only way that I sell it is in my email when I ask people, what is your goal right now? What are you wanting to work on? I'm really glad you're here. Like, I actually will communicate with you. Please ask me questions. And then when people tell me I want to build my private practice, that's when I just let them know this thing exists. Do you want to know more about it? Absolutely no pressure either way. And then if they do, I let them know about it. So it's like the simplest marketing system.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I love about it when I hear that is just how genuine it is. Like it really is you and I on the other end of those emails. So if somebody replies and says, "Yeah, actually, Annie, that does sound good. Tell me more." It's you, right? And that's really beautiful. So I love that. I think that's really special to have this other offering that you have. And it's not that it's like secret. It's just that you're like, I only really offer it when I see people have the need for it.
Mhm. And, like, I'm not gonna put you in a funnel. You're not
Yes.
gonna have, like, a suddenly a webinar that's available that I actually recorded last year, but, all of that
Right, right.
machinery is not gonna
Yes,
happen.
yes, machinery is such a good word for it.
So what for you, what has changed, if anything, around your sales copy?
Oh, good question. So it's tricky because this is something that people can probably tell on my landing pages, not even landing pages, it's just my website, on my website, on my Instagram. In terms of sales copy, I'm really trying to be cognizant of not re-traumatizing people because so much of the work that I do in money, there is trauma there. Right? There's so many pain points there that could easily be exploited by me, that instead I'm really being cognizant of, here's something that might be going on and here are the things that I do to help, rather than here's this pain point, I'm, your only hope. Like I am not anybody's Obi-Wan, right? I'm just like, hey, I am a person. I have some choices, some offerings here. So I would say that's how my sales language has changed. And I'm I'm playing with it, Annie. I will be really honest that is something that's still in flux. But the other thing, as I'm just thinking out loud about this, is that I do include on my sales pages, like if you want to know where I stand, what my values are, like on my About Me page, on my Learn More About Me page, I talk about my political beliefs, about where I donate, quarterly, because I also think it's important that as we all know, we vote with our dollars. And I wouldn't want to be spending my money on a coach who held widely different value systems than me. So I also want to be transparent about that. So I would say that is something that I realize as I'm talking through it, that I incorporate into my sales language is, here's who I am. And if that doesn't resonate with you, like, please don't feel like you have to spend money on me with me.
Yes, I love that. Around something that I know a lot of us are thinking about is how to not be manipulative with our sales copy and like to not lean into pain in a manipulative way. And something I've been thinking a lot about is there are some pain points that feel fair, that feel like it's not oppressive to talk about them, and others that feel like that's manipulative or, like you said, re-traumatizing. Like for me, one that's been coming up is like, you feel like you're wasting time. You feel
Mm-hmm.
like you're wasting time, and I can help you waste less time. To me, that doesn't feel manipulative, but if I were to say, "You're wasting time. If you keep going this way, you're gonna die alone," like there,
Yes.
I have
Yes.
crossed the line because that's not true. People are welcome to waste their time, and I think it's about being thoughtful and thinking about, like, if someone does dig into and notice the pain they're experiencing around this, like, who is that serving? Is it serving them, or is it, like, causing them harm?
Right. Right.
Uh, what about what have you noticed that you've put in place that may have surprised you? Like something that you've either taken out of your business practices or something that you've put into your business practices that you probably would have been surprised about at the beginning of 2020?
That I owned up to making the business and financial mistake that I did. I held so much shame for, how could I be a financial therapist who made a huge financial mistake. How can I be helping people cultivate a healthy relationship with their money when I was following kind of this machinery? That felt terrifying to me. I felt very fraudulent. There was a lot of imposter syndrome going on. And when I shared parts of my story, I thought I was going to get the feedback of, yeah, you are a fraud. And instead, I got the opposite. So that was really healing and powerful for me. And it's also something that I continually work on. I incorporated around the time that this money shame was really at its peak was in the summertime. I lean on astrology. That's a part of my spirituality that's really important to me. And full moons symbolically are a time to release things. So when I feel called to do it on full moons, I host full moon money shame release parties for women and femmes. And it's not recorded. It's a safe container where we talk about the money shame, we journal on it, and we speak to it. Because what we know is that shame needs secrecy and privacy to thrive, but it gets dialed down when we have validation and support from others and when we say it aloud. So that is something I never thought I would do. I thought people are going to think I'm out of my mind if I'm hosting a full moon party. Like, what is this evidence-based therapist here doing this? So being open and honest in an authentic way and not in a fake, transparent way, that was really shocking to me. And it's shocking how powerful those little things are to say, like, hey, here's a mistake that I made. You want to come heal with me while I heal my wound too? Mm.
Oh my God, I love it. Yes. Yes, that's so trust
Thank
building.
you.
I love it. These things may be impossible to measure because everything's happening at the same time, but how, if at all, has this set of changes impacted your bottom line?
It I'm starting to see it pay off in that everything takes time to build up and to build out. And what's interesting is when I offered the first round of my 9-week program, I I did not do it from a place of profitability and bottom line, which is so atypical for me. Like for me, I'm very much a numbers person. I like to see what's happening, what's coming in, what's going out. Like that for me is comfort and confidence. And that's also what I teach. But my anxiety and shame was still so high that I just wasn't able to do it. So this time around, I'm looking at it from a more numbers based standpoint. But because I feel like I'd been so warped about like fake money mindset stuff, I had to figure out like where do I actually stand? Where do I actually belong in terms of things? So I would say now the money is starting to generate again in a way that feels good for me. So it has impacted my bottom line for the better, but it took a little while to get there. So I would say there was like 3 or 4 months where it was slower, much slower.
But it's actually now
Oh yeah,
tipping the other
way
direction.
tipping the other direction.
That didn't take very
Thank you
long.
for saying that because it feels like when I was looking at my QuickBooks for a few months, it did feel like it was taking a long time, but you're right. In the grand scheme of things, a few months to be more authentic in your business is totally worth it.
Yeah, that happened for me it's happened to me around a lot of different kinds of changes. One thing it happened around was when I used to run my program twice a year, and then I switched to running it much more frequently, but with smaller groups. There was a decrease in my income for a while, and then an increase above what it had been. And one way that I think about this happens so often to therapists when they raise their fees or change their schedules to what feels more joyful, all kinds of things like that. It's like, I'm just going to say it the way it's actually coming to me. It's like the universe is saying, like, are you sure about the change? Because I'm going to like test you and bring up your fears around this and make it not look so good. So are you sure? And then like you stick with it. And then it's like, okay. So it doesn't always happen that way, but that's something I've noticed is like there's just like a little dip just to
Mhm.
make us real nervous
Mhm.
before it works
Mhm.
out.
Yeah, yeah.
So, how do you feel having made these changes? Like what do you feel like the impact is on you emotionally?
It has been Huge in the best way possible. I didn't realize how much trying to fit myself into somebody else's mold or framework or structure was impacting me until I broke out of it. And I didn't realize how much I was holding back, how much tension I was holding on to, and how much of a fraud I felt like. And so emotionally, I just feel so much more at peace. Social media feels fun to me again. Writing my email newsletters feels fun and joyful. And that is important to me. I did not create this business for the sole purpose of making money. That was not the point. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that. And so I feel like I'm just coming back into myself. And, anytime we make a mistake and are able to grow from it and kind of gain some resilience from it, I think it's so powerful and it's so beautiful, even when in the moment it can feel like you won't recoup. Like I really had those days where I was on the floor sobbing, like, what have I done? And to build it authentically and to start breaking away some of these methods that were not a good fit for me feels so much better. I'm doing so much better emotionally. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, it sounds like liberation.
Oh, yes, that's a great word. Yes.
So last time we talked, you said that you're not a morning person.
Yeah, that's still true.
And that you'd been like leaning more into your preferred rhythms. And one thing you said was that if you had it your way, you would never set an alarm
Yeah.
and you'd wake up naturally. And so then I was wondering, have you actually been able to live that dream in 2020?
That's a really good question. No, and my body has been sleeping through alarms.
Oh.
Like, I am not a
So your
person.
body's just like, fuck that. I don't care.
Exactly, exactly. My body's like, "No, you need this sleep, you need to rest." I think all of us this year have experienced so much more exhaustion, and no matter how much water you drink, how many walks you go on, how much whatever you have that's supposed to be good for your energy, at the end of the day, my body is just whooped. So yeah, I've been sleeping in and I think that might be the next thing, Annie, is like maybe just let it be. But I will say I have pushed back my morning appointments. I rarely start my day before 9 a.m.
This has been amazing. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so glad we were able to have this conversation. And I hope that, for any of the listeners who, again, have found themselves kind of in that hamster wheel and they're feeling like, oh, I don't know if it's a right fit for me, but everybody's telling me I need to have this abundance mindset. Like, listen to your gut. She's usually right. And Annie is living testament to doing business in an ethical, authentic, decolonized way. I'm taking steps towards it. It is absolutely possible. So if something doesn't feel good to you, there's probably a reason for it.
You can find out more about Lindsay at mindmoneybalance.com. I want to thank Cosmo Palms for editing this podcast. If you found this episode supportive, please share it with your favorite therapist or healer. That's how we reach more people. And thank you so much for listening. I will see you next time.